Two women sat in the office lunchroom, both eating salads. They had been sharing lunches and life stories with each other for over a month now. Julia bragged about her near-perfect marriage to her college professor husband. Sheila, the new girl, questioned the perfection of her marriage and made Julia admit that their sex life was getting duller and duller. Sheila still asked many questions about the neighborhood and social life, but she was most interested in Julia's life and activities. Julia gladly told her about her life with Charles. "Sheila, I can't believe how quickly you've settled into the job. You've only been here a month, and it seems like you've been here forever. And I'm not just sucking up to you because you're my boss." "Thanks. It helps that I'm doing pretty much the same job I did in Detroit. It all means I have competent employees like you." "Thank you. I do my best." Julia looked like she wanted to say something else but was shy. "Julia, do you have something on your mind?" "It's just that I've never met a woman like you before. You're absolutely gorgeous, both face and figure. There's nothing mysterious about you attracting men. What I don't understand is that I've seen men hit on you several times, and while I find their words vulgar and sexually inappropriate, it never seems to bother you. In fact, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, you are sometimes even worse than they are. Aren't you afraid these men will get the wrong impression?" "And who says I'm giving them the wrong impression?" The look on Julia's face could only be described as aghast. Sheila continued, "If the right man shows up, he'll make the right impression. And everyone else can go fight back in the men's room for all I care." "Sheila, you're incorrigible. You've been married before, haven't you?" "Twice, actually. Did you behave the same way with other men when you were married?" "Mostly. With one husband, we had an open marriage, and the other objected to me having boyfriends. I think I'll wait until I find someone who keeps me from being seduced by other men. Until then, I'll just go with the flow." The divorces, however, were amicable. Both were simple 50-50th decisions. No kids to worry about. I still have sex with one of my exes if I happen to run into him in the city where he lives when he can sneak away from his current wife. "Well, I never—" "That's the problem. You've never tried to be anything but Susie Homemaker, I'm sure. You could use the experience of broadening your horizons." "You mean like cheating on your husband? I can't do that. I don't want to do that. I love him and my marriage too much." "There are many ways to learn how to pleasure other men without cheating on your husband. Come with me on Friday to a club I found and I'll show you all about it. You'll have a great time and you won't feel guilty." "I've never gone to a place like this without Donald. I don't know if Donald would let me go there." "And here's the problem. You don't need to ask permission. Look, does your husband ever get out anywhere with the boys?" "He goes fishing regularly, Friday night and Saturday, once a month or more if the season is right." "Does he ask your permission?" "No, but it's just fishing." "Do you know that for sure? Maybe they take women with them or meet them there when they go, or maybe they sneak out at night to some questionable strip club. Maybe they're bisexual and enjoy each other." "That's ridiculous. I don't believe for a minute that he could do something like that." "But technically it's possible?" "Probably." "Then why don't you question him about it?" "Because I trust him." "Exactly. Shouldn't he trust you if you want to date girls?" "Probably." "Then don't ask him. Tell him you'll go with him next time he goes fishing." "Well, he has to go this weekend." "Great. Tell him you've decided not to stay home when he's out having fun with the boys. You're going out with your girlfriends and maybe even dance with the guys." "What if he says I can't go?" "Then don't go. Stay home with your submissive ass and think about what a hypocrite he is." "I guess I could try, but I'm scared." "Julia, most of the good things we've learned to enjoy in life were once scary to us." Finally, Julia plucked up her courage and spoke to her husband. "Donald, are you and the boys still going fishing this weekend?" "Yes, dear. Is there a problem? Did I forget something?" "No, no problem at all. I just thought this time, while you and your friends are having fun, I could do something different. Sheila, my new boss, asked me to go clubbing with her and a few other girls from work. They mostly gossip, have a few drinks, and dance." "Sounds like fun. Not my idea of fun, but fun nonetheless. I think you should go. You've been working hard and you need to blow off some steam. At least it'll get you out of the house for a while. Just don't drink too much. You know you don't tolerate alcohol very well. Maybe Sheila can help you watch your alcohol consumption. Do you mind if I dance with other men? That is, if anyone asks me to dance at all? Julia, you are a very attractive woman. Men will ask you to dance, especially when they see how well you dance. You know I'm a terrible dancer, so by dancing with someone else, you're not fooling me about anything. You have a good time. You don't need it, but you have my blessing. Thank you, Donald. You're a wonderful husband. Yes, I am, aren't I? They giggled. Julia was excited and nervous when she told Sheila about it the next day. Donald let me go. He even told me to dance with the other men and have a good time. Oh, he asked that you make sure I don't get carried away with alcohol. Great. Do you have an LBD? What? A little black dress. Something that catches a man's attention, that's easy to dance in and can be taken off quickly. I have a navy blue dress with a large neckline that I almost never wear. But rascal, I plan to keep it on me all the way home. Great. I'll pick you up at 7 o'clock on Friday night. I'm so nervous. Please make sure I don't have any problems. Yes, I promise. You won't get in any more trouble than I will. Okay, I guess. Sheila was thrilled with the way Julia looked. Julia thought Sheila was stunning too. She wished she had legs like that to wear the slit shirt Sheila wore. Their pair attracted the attention of many men as they entered the club. Julia was amazed at what was going on. Lights, music, dancing, and everyone seemed to be having fun. It was exciting. Sheila found a table for them, and they barely had time to sit down before the men started asking them to dance. Sheila immediately said yes, which left Julia no chance of refusal. It didn't seem to matter how well she could dance. Everyone just moved and smiled. After 3 quick dances in a row, Julia and Sheila sat down at a table and tried to order drinks. Their dance partners ordered and paid for the drinks. It's the least we could do for having 2 of the most beautiful girls here dancing with us. Julia turned to Sheila. I was hoping we'd have a chance to talk a little. Just the 2 of us. Sheila replied, trying to speak louder than the music. Wait for the band to take a break. Attempts to talk to the men between songs were mostly futile. When a slow song came on, the men immediately stood up and asked to dance. Julia looked forward to it with dread. She was used to only holding Donald in her arms, and they mostly just swayed back and forth. Julia's man started slowly as the couple tried to get used to dancing together. When they got used to each other, Julia let him pull her closer. She rested her head on his shoulder, and his hand moved to the small of her back, away from her ass. His cologne was tantalizing, and his breath on her neck was exhilarating. She realized she was becoming aroused, and it felt good. When they returned to the table, Julia asked Sheila to go to the bathroom with her. Once in the restroom, Sheila asked, Having a good time? Looks like it. Yeah, but I'm starting to feel guilty. Why? Has he been groping you, pressed his bulge against your bump? If so, it's called a modern slow dance. The problem is, I like the way he holds me. He makes me feel things that only my husband used to make me feel. I just don't want things to go too far and too fast. Julia, tell me honestly, have you cheated on your husband even once? Of course not. Why are you asking that? To get you to admit that you can enjoy another man's touch without cheating on your husband. Go back and let me know how big your boyfriend's package is. Mine doesn't have it very big. I can't do that. I'd just have a good time. Nothing more. Julia and Sheila went back to the table. The group had a break and could talk without shouting. Both guys were lawyers who worked together. No one talked about spouses except Julia. She made it clear that she was happily married. Sheila jumped up and said she was happily married. She then threw a don't blow the case look at Julia. Apparently, Sheila's man picked up on the negative vibes she was giving off due to his lack of size. Julia's man was so disappointed that Julia announced her marital status that he became disinterested. They mentioned that they had promised other women and quickly disappeared. Soon, 2 more guys came up. They waited for a slow song. When the girls got up from the table, Sheila spoke up. Don't forget to tell me about the package on the new boyfriend. Julia blushed, following her boyfriend to the floor. Having had her 3rd drink, Julia was ready to say, What the hell? She hugged her man tightly and let her hand run up and down his ass, as well as rubbing it. When the song ended, she was disappointed. Julia stood still, feeling slightly euphoric from the dance as her man kissed her on the lips. Somehow it just worked itself out, and she kissed him back. The romantic interlude was interrupted by a quick song. A few quick dances helped her dry off and regain emotional control. When they sat down at the table again, Sheila's boyfriend pulled his chair closer and seemed to run his hand under the tablecloth and rest it on Sheila's leg. Sheila didn't resist. Julia's boyfriend tried to follow suit. Julia panicked when she felt the hand move above her knee. "Sheila has to go now. I have to get up early tomorrow." Surprisingly, Sheila didn't argue. They thanked the guys for dancing and drinking. They were clearly worked up. Walking out the door was a sure ticket to getting laid. On the way home, Julia nearly cried. Sheila said, "Too much and too fast, huh? It's no big deal. It's no big deal, nothing bad." "I haven't been touched by a guy other than my husband in so long. I was scared." "Were you a virgin when you got married?" "Yes. Donald was my first, and still is the only one." "So the things you did with the other boys, the hand jobs and massages, weren't sex?" "I don't think it was. They said it wasn't, and I thought it wasn't." "You were right. It wasn't sex. It was what I call pleasure. Don't worry about it. You were a virgin when you got married, and you didn't have sex with men at the club either." "I guess you're right. What's your point?" "If the hand job and massage wasn't sex, then you can do it with other guys now, just like you did then. It wouldn't be cheating." "I never thought about that. I thought about what Donald might say if he saw it. I guess I didn't behave that badly tonight, technically speaking." After pausing for a second, Julia continued. "Sheila, I'm really sorry that I caused you to end your evening so early. You and your boyfriend seem to get along so well. Just another fish in the sea. So, are you ready to go fishing again next Friday?" "Well, I had a good time. It was a lot more fun than what I usually do while Donald's away. Let me think about it. We'll see how it goes after I see Donald tomorrow night." Julia walked into the darkened house. She saw that it was only 10:30. The night's events had put her in an excited state of mind. She called Donald. "Julia, are you okay? Why are you calling so late?" "I just wanted to tell you that you are the most wonderful husband in the world." "I take it you enjoyed your night with the girls?" "Yes, I had a great time. I'm home now, and I miss you very much. I hope you won't be too exhausted tomorrow night. I have some plans, and it's not cleaning fish." "Well, at the rate we're fishing, you don't have to worry. Look, we're leaving early in the morning. I'm glad you had a good time. I love you." "I love you even more." She slept soundly that night. The next night, Donald was called to the bedroom when he came home. A naked woman pounced on him, undressed him, and wouldn't let him shower. Fishy odor or not, she was not to be denied. Donald was exhausted, but he was even more exhausted with happiness. After a couple days, Julia and Donald were back to normal, except for the occasional smirk on the face of one or both of them. They had sex every night that week. Donald didn't even ask where she was going when Julia started getting ready for her date the following Friday night. She told him that if he waited for her, she would make it worthwhile. He smiled in agreement. That Friday started out about the same as the previous Friday. 2 hounds from the new wolf pack danced with Julia and Sheila. This time the hands stayed on Julia's ass, and the kiss at the end of the dance involved tongues. Julia had more to drink than last time and felt lighter than air. Every now and then she glanced at Sheila to make sure she still had her back. When a certain pair of guys had established their relationship with the girls, Julia kept waiting for something was about to happen. She whispered to Sheila, "I don't think my boyfriend likes me. He hasn't done anything about it." "Make sure he knows you're interested." "How?" "Touch him." Julia's shock was short-lived. She turned to her boyfriend and ran her hand under the table along his thigh. His surprise translated into an understanding smile, and he turned toward her so that she could reach him, and he could reach hers. Sheila advised them to get some cool air and gave Julia the car keys. Stepping outside, Julia took her boyfriend and unlocked the car. After looking around and seeing no one, they got in the back seat. It was just like high school. Julia regretfully ended it there, despite her boyfriend's fear of death in a blue balloon if he couldn't have her. She had to turn everything into black and blue death before he realized what she was talking about. Julia turned back to the table. A mixture of emotions raged inside her. First and foremost was the sense of pleasure she was receiving. A man playing with her body and not her husband. It was arousing and sexy. Julia was proud that another man wanted her body, and not just because he was her wife. She was attractive to him. He wanted her, even if she wasn't ready to do what he hoped she would. She took great pleasure in not having sex, and there was no need to cheat. Shortly after returning, Sheila got into her boyfriend's car. 30 minutes later, she and her boyfriend returned, looking pleased. They exchanged phone numbers and said goodbye. Julia and Sheila got into the car to leave. The smell of sex was obvious. Julia remarked, "I'm glad we drove your car today. Remind me to bring my Febreze with me when it's my turn to drive." They both chuckled. Before heading home, Julia thought about Donald waiting for her. The closer they drove to the house, the more excited she became. He was waiting for her in the living room. They came no closer to the bedroom than where he was sitting. An hour passed before they went to bed. The next Friday night, Sheila was out of town. Donald asked Julia if she was going out. Julia replied that although she had enjoyed the last 2 Fridays very much, tonight she wanted to stay home and enjoy being with her husband. They watched a movie, ate popcorn, and slowly made love. The following Monday at lunch, Sheila and Julia met as usual. "Well, Julia, it looks like you had a great time last Friday when you and I went out, if it weren't for your knee problem." "It wasn't my knee problem, it was his." They laughed. Donald had another fishing trip planned, so Julia scheduled a Friday night out with Sheila. On the way to the club, Sheila asked, "Since Donald won't be home tonight, are you planning on taking a man home?" "You know I can't do that. It was hard enough for me to stop the guy in the back of the car in the parking lot. There's no way I could trust myself in bed with a guy. Besides, I don't want to cheat on my husband. It wouldn't be fair to him." Sheila stopped her car in the bank parking lot. "Julia, let's talk about fairness. Please hear me out. You were a virgin before you married Donald, right?" "Yes." "And Donald was a virgin before you married?" "No, but he wasn't promiscuous or wild." "But you had no problem marrying a man who had slept with several other women before you?" "No, that was before we were married, so I couldn't hold a grudge against him." "Yeah. Did you ask him who these women were and how good or not good each of them were in bed?" "No, I'd rather he kept that a secret." "Do you think he might have learned some sex techniques from one or all of the women he slept with and then used them when making love to you?" "Probably. That makes sense. Then it probably helped you that he had sex with other women." "Probably. If you had slept with several other men, do you think Donald would still have married you?" "Perhaps he wasn't impressed when I told him I was a virgin. After we made love on our wedding night, he said, 'I see you have yet to learn about sex. It's a good thing we have the rest of our lives to practice.' I almost felt guilty that I hadn't had sex with other men before we were married." "Exactly. You didn't have the opportunity to bring sexual experiences with other men into your marriage. It's safe to say that you created a deficit of sexual techniques in your relationship by not being with other men. So is it fair that he had more experience than you?" "I think not." "It seems to me that since you have a deficit of sexual experience compared to Donald, you need to reduce that deficit to make things fair. Since he didn't care if you had sex with others before you got married, what's wrong with making up the deficit now?" "But I can't go back and have sex before the wedding." "Look, you wanted him to keep his sexual relationships with previous mistresses a secret. He would probably want you to keep all of your previous sexual relationships secret. The only difference is the timing. He got his sexual experience before marriage. You get your sexual experience after marriage. He kept his secret. You keep yours. Everything is equalized. The deficit is negated." "I never thought of it that way." "And it's unfair that he had all those experiences and you didn't. And he will benefit from your future sexual experiences. In a way, you'll be doing him a favor by improving your ability to make love. You just can't tell him about yours just as he hasn't told you about his." That's starting to make sense. I think if everything is right, I'm ready to have a new experience tonight. After a few drinks, slow dances, and hands under the table, she left the club with the man. Julia gave the guy directions to her house. She wanted to make sure he would last long enough for them to have sex. Once there, Julia made him sit in the car until she opened the garage door so he could park inside. There was no need to answer any questions from the neighbors. It seemed strange to her to be in her house with another man. He asked for a drink first, but she, fearing she might lose her good judgment, replied, "We're here for sex. Let's have sex." He didn't argue. He came around pretty quickly, and the sex dragged on. Julia kept expecting something different from him than what she was getting from her husband, but she didn't see or feel anything different. Even less. Julia hoped she would have the kind of finish that so many romance novels write about. She was in the midst of a fake orgasm when she noticed a light on her bedside phone. A text message had come to her. At first, she thought something had happened to her husband, perhaps an accident. Shortly after the man came out, Julia listened to the message. "Julia, I realize it's late, but I just had to call you. Tonight, after a few beers, we started talking about wives. Most of the guys were cursing their wives. You know, spending too much, getting too fat, drinking all the time, flirting with other men or worse. When it came to me, I had to admit I have the most wonderful wife a man could ever have. I just wanted you to know how I feel. Good night. I love you." Julia began to cry. Her lover asked what was wrong. She told him to get out. When he didn't make it, she threatened to throw his clothes and belongings out the front door whether he was wearing them or not. He quickly got dressed and ran downstairs. She couldn't believe it when he returned. "Didn't I make myself clear? Get out, immediately." "But I can't open the garage door. You have to do it." She came down the stairs, gasping between sobs. As soon as he pulled out of the garage, she closed the door again and ran upstairs. She took all the bedding and put it in one of the pillowcases. Julia didn't want to see those sheets again, even if she had washed them. Instead, she took them to the fire, put kindling in there, and poured lighter fluid on them. The fire flickered at first, but then subsided. She stayed to make sure the flames consumed every last crumb. If only she could do that, remembering what she had done. Several weeks passed. When Donald returned from another fishing trip, he was disappointed that Julia didn't pounce on him like she had before. She said she felt as if she had something wrong. In the days that followed, she often repeated how lucky she was to have him as her husband. The sex was frequent and intense. The house was spotless, and her meals were almost gourmet. He was spoiled. Donald wondered what had caused the difference. His first thought was Friday nights, but Julia casually stated that they had become boring, and she didn't want to go there anymore. One day, Donald was working in his office at the college, and he got a phone call. "Hello, this is Donald. How can I help you?" "Donald, you don't know me, but I work with your wife. I need to talk to you about her." He could hear her sniffling in the background. "What do you need to tell me?" "Can we meet in person? I just don't feel like talking about this over the phone. Are you free for lunch? Eduardo's restaurant seems to be close to your office. Can you meet me there at 12 o'clock? I'll be dressed in a black skirt and red blouse." "Okay. Can't you tell me anything right now? You've got me worried." "I'm sorry about that. I'll see you at noon." For the rest of the morning, Donald didn't have time to do anything. His mind flashed back to problems at work, illnesses she was afraid to tell him about, possible gambling debts or secret drug use. Anything but what was in question. Donald arrived early and spotted a woman in red and black. As he approached her, he saw her beautiful face, the tight blouse encasing her breasts, and the slender leg between the slits in the side of her dress. She was one of the most gorgeous women he had ever seen in person. She noticed his approach and smiled forcedly. "Donald?" "Yes. And you are?" "I'd rather not talk right now. I don't want to be a part of this as much as possible." Donald sat down and ordered a soft drink. He never drank hard liquor. At least that's what he told himself. Donald wondered if that never had come. "Please tell me, is Julia in some kind of trouble?" "That depends on how you react to what I tell you." Tears and sniffles again. "I've been contemplating whether or not to tell you for weeks. I couldn't sleep, and it was starting to affect my work. I'm so sorry." "I'm losing my mind. What happened to my wife?" I'm not trying to tease you by withholding information. It's just so hard to tell you about someone I considered a close friend. You see, I'm the one who goes out with her on Friday nights. Are you one of the girls? I'm Sheila, and I'm a girl. She thought it would sound safer for you to think she was dating a group of girls. Anyway, she and I work together. I broke up with my boyfriend and asked her where to meet nice guys. She said there was one particular place she goes to when you go out of town fishing. She asked if I wanted to go. Julia said I was so pretty I would help her attract better-looking guys. Sure, I replied. We went to the club and it was obvious she was a regular there. She blew off the first few guys who tried to hit on us. Soon we found a couple that met her standards. Soon we were dancing. Or rather, I was dancing. Julia was performing during the fast songs and basically making out with the guy who was with her during the slow dances. I was fine with my boyfriend, but Julia told me that I wasn't nice enough to him. I tried to pay more attention to him, but I saw the other guy put his hands under Julia's skirt. I made Julia leave and we both went home pretty early. I'm so sorry, Sheila. I find this incredibly hard to believe. It's not like my Julia. Do you have any evidence of that? I'll look into it. The next day at work, Julia got mad at me. I told her that I wasn't like her and that I wouldn't be seeing her again. That pissed her off even more. She needed me as bait to attract men. Julia threatened to tell the people we worked with that I was a slut, and at my previous job I was fired for sleeping with my boss. They traded her a good reference for getting fired. Who would they believe? Julia, who had worked there for years, or the new girl no one knew? I was scared. I had just moved here, and losing my job at this time would be financially devastating. I agreed to go out with her again, but asked her to tone it down. The next week we went on a date and she became more reserved. When she and her new boyfriend became friends, she asked me for my car keys. I wondered where she was going. I found out when we got in my car. I've never been to a brothel, but I bet it smells just like the back seat of my car that night. I like that I never got rid of some of the stains and odor. I never heard any proof. I'm getting to that point. The last time you were out of town, we went to the club again. Julia announced that she was going to invite a guy to take her home and spend the night with her. I was left to my own devices once she and the guy made the arrangements. I was having a good time and everything was fine. It was still early, so I stayed over. A couple hours later, her boyfriend came back and sat down with us again. Here's the story I recorded from him. Man, that was a weird bitch. This chick Julia was all over me here while we were driving to her and her old man's place. She made me pull into the garage and told me some nosy old lady lived next door. We go into the house. I try to create a mood and ask for a drink. She says, "Donald doesn't drink alcohol. Forget the booze, let's go have fun." I'm fine with that. We go upstairs and our clothes fall to the floor. No foreplay, just in and out. Well, she got me so turned on that I didn't finish right away, which is unusual. A few more minutes passed and it was time for round 3. It was good lovemaking. I started to rest again for round 4 when she went to check her answering machine. Suddenly she starts crying and yelling at me to get out. I can't move fast enough to satisfy her, so she starts threatening me. Next time I try to grope some married asshole, just shoot me. Is that proof enough for you to believe me? Yes. Do you want a copy? No, I don't ever want to hear it again. What about a divorce? That won't help. Adultery isn't grounds for divorce in this state. We'll divide the property and she'll get alimony. I'll get some, but I don't care. I just want to be done with her. No chance of reconciliation? I don't even want to see her anymore. I just want to crawl under a rock. Is there anything I can do to help? No offense, but why do you want to help? I feel it's partly my fault. Besides, my husband cheated on me. I was devastated. It took me a long time and many hours of therapy to get myself straightened out. I cannot stand by and let you suffer alone. Please let me help you. Sheila placed her hand on his and smiled lovingly at him. Julia sat at the kitchen table and shed tears over the note and wedding ring her husband had left behind. He told her what he knew about her cheating in their home. He said he would willingly give up his half of the house because he didn't want to set foot on the threshold of a place where he had been betrayed. Someone else would come for his belongings. She was advised to sign the divorce papers as soon as they were served. Donald was unwilling to talk to her. Julia called work and took indefinite sick leave. 2 days later, the divorce papers arrived. She called his lawyer, getting voicemail on his cell and work phones. All 10 times she called. Donald's lawyer told her that Donald wasn't interested in talking to her. He said he doubted Donald would even show up for the hearing. The lawyer said he had power of attorney for Donald. Julia signed the papers and accepted her fate. It was her own fault for believing Sheila, although Julia wished that Sheila had shared some of her pain. Now she had to go back and work under her. Julia went to Human Resources and asked to be transferred to another department. She was denied. She couldn't tell them the real reason she needed a transfer. Julia reluctantly went back to work. She and Sheila communicated only in writing, a concise and professional tone. Because of her depression, Julia's work was not good, but Julia's performance report exaggerated her mistakes. After Julia was given a month to correct, she was fired. There was no motivation to fight. Julia moved back home to her mom and dad, which was a pleasant choice for Julia, if only because it was 1,000 miles away from Donald, Sheila, and the memories of her affair. Julia found a job as a cashier at a grocery store, mostly so there would be something to do. Her parents took her in and tried to cheer her up and move on with their lives. Not an hour, much less a day or a week, went by that she didn't ask herself, "How could I have been so stupid?" As the months went by, the depression persisted, growing and hardening. It intensified the day she received the notice of dissolution of marriage. The pills didn't help much. Counseling didn't help any better. Only one thing could save her: anger. She didn't seek anger as a cure, but she learned that anger would bring her out of her depression when she learned that Donald had remarried. Only his remarriage was not the cause of the anger. She expected him to remarry eventually. He was a great catch. The real cause of her anger was that he had married Sheila. That bitch! She set me up! Why would she want Donald? It wasn't until a few minutes of reminiscing about earlier lunches with Sheila, where Julia had praised her husband and shown pictures of the handsome, fit man, that Julia knew the answer. Sheila said she had been waiting for the right man. The problem was it was Julia's man. Now Julia was hungry for revenge. Her penchant for non-violence was gone. She not only needed to get revenge on Sheila, but she needed to get Donald back. It would not be easy. Donald was fishing with his buddies when an unfamiliar car pulled up to the house. He made it back to the cabin before he saw who it was. It was hard to make the decision not to return to the lake. The opportunity to give closure won out. Tying the boat to the dock, he motioned for Julia to head to the cabin. Once both were inside, he asked how she was doing. "Lousy," she replied. "What do you want, Julia? You didn't fight the divorce, and I assumed you weren't disputing any of the facts I'm basing my divorce on." "No, I don't dispute it. I admit that I cheated on you. But it was only partly my fault. I've certainly done enough to justify your divorce, but there's something else you need to know. Just answer me one question. Who told you about my betrayal?" "I don't see how that makes any difference." "It matters if it's the same person who set me up to cheat on you. It was Sheila, wasn't it? Did she drug you? Did she threaten you? Did she use physical force on you?" "No, she talked me into it." Donald laughed. "She talked you into it. Boy, you must have really loved me if you were so easily persuaded to betray your husband. Give me a break. Such attacks are sophomoric." "I didn't say I wasn't stupid. She knows how to manipulate people very well. She made it sound like I was doing something that would improve our marriage. Now she's convinced you to marry her. She's a whore, Donald. A conniving, sneaky, lying whore. I promise you she will betray you with another man, if she hasn't already." "Julia, this is why I didn't want to talk to you. You've turned into a pathetic shell of your old self. I feel sorry for you. I don't feel hate. I don't feel love. I just feel sorry. I just thank God we didn't have children. Please go back to where you came from and move on with your life." "I did." Julia left in tears. Now she had no hope of changing Donald's mind. Sheila had worked her black magic on him. The only thing left to do was to get revenge on Sheila. She needed something to happen to make him grieve. Carrying out her plan, Julia stayed at the cheapest motel she could find. She stalked Sheila and kept an eye on Donald's activities. When she saw Donald going fishing one Friday, she had hope. Later that day, Julia saw Sheila leave the house wearing an LBD dress. Julia hoped she was heading to the club, a place Julia knew not only inside the club, but also outside in the parking lot. Julia found Sheila's car and parked away from her. She waited for Julia to get out. Julia even had to squat down and pee behind the car farthest away from the club. A year earlier, she would have sworn she could never do anything like that. Now she was hardly embarrassed. Finally, Sheila came out with a boy in her arms. Her male friend told her she had a flat tire. Of course, he volunteered to change it. As he was lowering the jack, Julia came up behind him and hit him with the tire changer from her car. She hit hard to make sure he blacked out. A shaken Sheila was about to run when Julia pulled a gun on her. Sheila quickly pulled herself together. Well, if it isn't the ex-wife, you couldn't get your husband back, so you came to kill me. You don't have the guts, bitch. She started walking toward the club. A bullet pierced Sheila's left leg. She went down. Julia pointed her to Area B in the parking lot. Get up and go there or die here. I don't care. You better take me to the emergency room. I promise not to tell. Yeah, sure, move, bitch. I'll let you bleed out. It took Donald quite a while to come to terms with the supposed loss of his new wife. Her car was found in the parking lot outside the club where his first wife was meeting her lover. Some man said he walked Sheila to her car, where he was knocked out. There was Sheila's blood nearby. The trail of blood went to the parking lot and ended there. Foul play was expected, but no body was found. The prime suspect was his ex-wife, but she wasn't found either, nor was her car found. Once the cops were sure Sheila was dead, he held a memorial service. Julia's arrest warrant remained outstanding. It was time to reevaluate his life. Donald went fishing alone. He needed some alone time to figure out what to do next with his life. He dropped his things at the cabin and headed out to the lake with his fishing gear. When he got to the dock, he was surprised to see that his boat was gone. First he looked down to see if it had sunk. No, the bottom was visible. Then he looked over the horizon. It was there, in the middle of the lake. He returned to the cabin and drove to the next cabin where he saw the Land Rover parked. Donald knocked on the door and introduced himself to the man who opened it for him. After he explained his dilemma, the man agreed to take Donald into his boat to help retrieve Donald's boat. They both noticed that Donald's boat was not moving. Donald realized what the cause was. His boat's anchor was down and the rope was taut. Donald sat down in his boat and looked around. The only unusual thing he saw was a gun. He knew better than to touch it. Donald was puzzled and a little frightened. His new friend waited for Donald to raise the anchor before towing the boat to shore. When Donald pulled on the anchor rope, he could barely move it. There was no way he could lift it out of the water. It seemed to be very heavy and/or snagged on something. He asked his neighbor for help. They secured the rope so that it passed through the oar holder into the man's boat. Before the rope began to move, the throttle was depressed and lifted up. The neighbor's boat slowly moved forward. Donald began to sort out what was stuck on the anchor rope. Suddenly, Donald screamed in terror and began to cry loudly. His neighbor stopped his boat and looked around. On the rope lay the swollen and decomposed bodies of two